tonight was, well, what do atheist evolutionists want? That's something just for now to think about. What is it that they want, right? We've all had discussions with them. What do they want from us? What do they want? In a second here, we're going to play clip 3. And I would imagine the annals of lectures about creation and evolution, there's probably not been many lecturers who show a video clip from a Charles Bronson movie. But I'm going to show this one because it appealed to me how they discussed issues of truth. So let's play this one.
Long hair, why are you whites in my country? Did not ask the whites to come here. The great spirits gave us these hills as a home. You say, why do not we become civilized? We do not want your civilization.
You've spoken red truth.
Tell me then white truth, long hair.
In the first place, the Great Spirit did not give you these hills. You took this land by force. You took it from the Cheyenne, the Shoshone, and the Arapaho. You took it with the lance and tomahawk. And now the white man makes war on you. What's the difference?
The whites have no honor. A white man walks death, comes out of season.
That's a thing called progress.
The thing called greed. Tell me this. Am I evil because my skin is red? Is it a wicked thing that I was born when my father was born? Is it a bad thing that I would die for my people?
It's still red truth and not real truth.
Tell me this true truth, then.
Give Red John the word. Tell the little rooster he's extinct.
Bull. When Sitting Bull was a boy, the Sioux could throw 10,000 warriors into battle. Today, it's the white man's turn. Those that you have seen on these hills and on the plains are like a handful of bees. There are many. They are more than the blades of spring grass, more than the buffalo when they smother the earth in their great herds. There's no way to stand against the white man. Their weapons are terrible. They have the power. You will bend to the long knives or be broken. You will live as they say or die on their bayonets.
That was straight tongue, Captain.
If such is the true truth, then I will sing my death song.
No. I will not have your death.
Why not? You are white.
First, I am your brother and your friend.
Long hair. Between us, there shall be no war.
That's from a movie called The White Buffalo. And so what really stuck out at me is that they're telling the native, well, you're speaking red truth. And he's telling the honkies, you're speaking white truth, right? But then, oh, and it's still red truth. It's not real truth. So he says, well, tell me this true truth, right? So the red truth and the white truth are more like perspectives. But they finally get to, well, what's the actual ontological reality, right? That's the real truth. That's the true truth. And I love how he says, that was straight tongue. So that's something that what kind of motivated me to start thinking about this and also presenting a talk about it is to get beyond, well, that's why I'm asking, what do they want from us, right? They want us to accept their perspective or the actual real truth. What are we getting at really? Right. So now, one of the issues is that when we look back to Darwin's book, it referred to natural selection. And so that's not the intelligent design proponents, neo-Darwinism intelligent selection. It's actually natural selection. And if there's anything about which I agree with Richard Dawkins, it's when he said that in nature, the selecting agent is simple and it's stark. It's the Grim Reaper. I mean, that's it, right? Natural selection. It means something falls over dead or it doesn't. That's pretty much it. You put a St. Bernard and a Chihuahua in the North Pole, one of them's going to fall over dead. The other one isn't. But one of the issues when dealing with evolution, philosophically, I guess, or just commonsensically, is that, okay, so there's evidence of natural selection. There's evidence of what's called adaptation. There's evidence of what's called variation. There's evidence of what's called speciation even. I'm granting the difficulty of defining the term species. But the issue is you have evidence for all these, but then evolutionists just came along and say, hey, these all belong to us. And now we're going to call all of that evolution, and now we're going to claim that all of that evidence is evidence of evolution. That's one of the main problems right there, is that it's natural selection, adaptation, variation, speciation. Let's just call it all evolution, and then we'll claim that evidence is ours, right? Right. That's something to keep in mind, incidentally. And another thing to keep in mind, that once I noticed it and started reading about it, now I can't help but notice it all the time, is evolutionary storytelling. I was just listening to a debate today between an evolutionist and a creationist, and I thought, wow, that answer the evolutionist just gave was literally just a story. Zero evidence. It was just a story motivated by the evolutionary narrative. That's what it was. And then let's listen to a video clip number 4, just for a little word about that from Stephen Jay Gould.
Human beings are storytelling animals, and we like our stories to go certain ways. We don't really care much for Ecclesiastes-type stories about all rivers running into the sea and the sea not filling up. They don't go anywhere. We like stories about trends. We love trends, because then either something's getting better and we can celebrate, or something's getting worse and we can lament. And we seem to like to do both with equal frequency, depending on the season. And therefore, I think that so many scientific things that need to be explained, but that need to be explained in the narrative mode as stories, fall prey to a peculiar kind of bias that we don't pay enough attention to. Scientists and historians and commentators of science are very used to analyzing politically based biases, socially based biases, but there's also a form of literary bias in which, when, for example, we're saying something about the history of life, which is an intrinsically historical theme in science, we manage to tailor our stories to fit into the kinds of tales we know best. We like to make them tales about trends. Just as one example, which isn't so much about trends, if you ever really look in detail at the histories of theories about human evolution, you might think that they and their changes are based primarily on increasingly better data from the fossil record, but so much of the standard way of looking at human evolution is really just a reflection of the standard themes of myths and sagas. We have the hero, who's conventionally male. In fact, until recent feminist critiques, almost the entire story of human evolution was... I'm getting some awful feedback here. We're often just the stories of what men do. You never quite knew where the women were. They were presumably sitting around the hearth taking care of the kids, but you didn't get it in the narratives. But so much of the conventional narrative was the birth of the hero going out, and it was almost like Parsifal and the Red Knight all over again. And so I think that's a very important theme. And what I want to talk about today is the way in which we've had wrong views, in fact, curiously inverted, not only just wrong, but precisely opposite to the way in which we could find better explanations, because of our desire to find trends, that because of our desire to tell stories as tales about trends.
Well, it's too bad he's not interested in Ecclesiastes talking about the sea never filling up, because that's part of the Bible's prediction of the hydrological cycle. But hey, who wants to bother with that? Now, Michel Landau has done a fair amount of writing about storytelling and what's supposed to be science. So, for instance, in Human Evolution as Narrative, published in American Scientist in 1984, she writes, "Scientists are generally aware of the influence of theory on observation. Seldom do they recognize, however, that many scientific theories are essentially narratives. They may be unaware of the narrative presuppositions which inform their science. One scientific discipline that appears open to the importance of narrative is paleoanthropology. Certainly, the number of recent articles and books on the subject of bias in the study of fossil men, including one titled The Myth of Human Evolution, that's by Eldridge and Tattersall in 1982, suggests that paleoanthropologists are aware of the literary aspects of their study. Multiple interpretations and ambiguity are no strangers to readers of evolutionary biology. By comparing the narrative roles played by fossil scientists may become more explicit about the subjective and often highly imaginative ways in which they reconstruct human ancestors. Note, by the way, she said scientists are generally aware of the influence of theory on observation. Right? It should be that they're aware of the influence of observation on theory. Right? I mean, that's precisely backwards. But it's true, right? They have a theory in mind, that's their worldview lens, and now they're making observations. And what they see is informed by their worldview bias, rather than saying, hey, I'm observing this, and now I'm formulating a theory based on that. You know, it's easy to kind of get that backwards. She also was quoting from The Baron and the Trees, a presentation to a conference on variability in human evolution in 1983, where she noted that paleoanthropologic literature is, quote, thick with interpretations, not about what the fossils look like, but also about what they mean, right? So that's a whole different ballgame, and we need to kind of train ourselves to distinguish, like I did with the statement from the intelligent design proponent, is like, well, wait a minute. When are you describing what you are seeing when you look at a fossil and what you found and where you found it and all that versus what it means, right? Roger Lewin in Bones of Contention was quoting from Human Evolution, The View from Saturn in the Search for Extraterrestrial Life, Recent Developments, 1985, and he wrote, Metaphors cast powerful spells not only in everyday life, but also in science. When Stern and Sussman say, quote, A. efferensis had traveled well down the road towards full-time bipedality, not only do they speak in metaphor, they also tell a story. Okay, so now, as far as storytelling, video clip 5 will show us what happens when Richard Dawkins is trying to tell a story and the story fails him, and we'll see what happens.
So there isn't a process, as it were, going on in the cell saying, look, be patient.
No.
It's going to be a feather, believe me.
Yes. It doesn't happen like that. There's got to be a series of advantages all the way in the feather. If you can't think of one, then that's your problem, not natural selection's problem. Natural selection, well, I suppose that is a sort of matter of faith on my part, since the theory is so coherent and so powerful.
That's like one of the core features of his atheistic evolution, and we see he turns out to be a man of faith, right? It's like, oops, I got nothing here. Well, it's faith, I got faith. What do you want? So now, Metapologetics, like I said, talking about the big picture, and the answer to the premier philosophical question. When we think about Genesis 1:1, stating, in the beginning God created the heavens and the earth, well, there we have that in the beginning, that's time, God created the heavens, that's space, and the earth, that's matter. But how is it that 3.5 millennia ago, some ignorant goat herder, as atheists tell us, or the guys who wrote the Bible, how did they know the most up-to-date cosmology? How did they know that the most up-to-date cosmology tells us our universe is a time-space matter continuum? How did they know that? incidentally, I'm going to throw this one in for free. So I think when it says the heavens and the earth just refers to matter. Just God created matter. And guess what? It was formless and void. And then he formed some of that matter into the planet that we call the earth. So that's just my take on what that's all about. No gap, no nothing like that. God creates matter, it's formless and void. Some of it he forms into the earth, and then he starts talking about what's going on in the earth. Anyhow. So I kind of would think that when, especially in one single verse, we get modern day cosmology, it might be worthwhile taking that text seriously and considering what it says. There's other aspects of this because we see that God is the one who created time, space, and matter. So then he must be beyond or outside or without a need to exist in that time, space, matter. So he would be timeless or eternal, spaceless, or without being subject to a particular locality or omnipresent, and immaterial or spirit. I mean, there you have a basic theology and a basic cosmology in one single verse. And there's so much more there, like, well, God created the heavens and the earth. So he's viably bringing forth a plan that he has. So there's intelligence involved. There's potency. He's omnipotent. He's able to create these things. I mean, there's so much you could dive into in one single verse, not to mention that as Genesis 1 continues, then you have predictions of some of the laws of thermodynamics, such as conservation, right? God's creating, and then stops. God rests from his work. He stops creating. So then, within that system, assuming it's closed, yeah, energy changes, but there's no more being added to it. It's conserved, right? It might, matter might change into energy. Energy may become unusable, but there's no more coming in. That's a prediction right there, another one. So now, what we have in Genesis also is that the evening and the morning, it's the first day, and the evening and the morning, it's the second day, and the evening and the morning. And then you have organisms reproducing after their own kind, after their own kind, after their own kind, right? So you have this system of cause and effect, right? Like linear time, chronological time, one moment followed by the other, right? Linear time, I always say, boy, I tell you, it's just one thing after another. Linear time. And that's important for us in terms of building a worldview, because really the scientific method, okay, not just science in general, not just observation in general, not even just experimentation in general, but the rigors of the scientific method were based on biblical theology as the mother of the philosophies, because the view was that a rational God created a rational creation and populated it with rational beings who could therefore rationally discern it. And that's why we can do science. And that's not only why we can, it's why we should and why we ought. And that is going to become very important as we get close to wrapping this up. That's a huge difference between can and should or ought, or the is-ought distinction, as a lot of people call it. There's a difference between is and ought. We're going to get back to that in a second. And so from that we learn that God created his creation in a certain way so that it's discoverable, so that things make sense, so that one thing follows from another. And that's why scientists all over the planet can say to each other, hey, I conducted this experiment this way, can you reproduce it? And if they can, it's because things in creation are the way that God created them. If not, then there's probably just something wrong. And that's often how scientists correct each other. Wait a minute, there's something wrong at this step or whatever. But that's the reason they can reproduce experiments if the experiments are well done. It's because you don't have different laws of physics across the planet, right? God created order. So this gives us the premise, the ability to then do science and do logic and do philosophy, right? The philosophy of science. And not just can, but that we must, right? And that's a distinguishing feature of our worldview, is not just that we can do these things, but that we're called to. We're called to know the truth. Truth exists. It exists on purpose. And we're called to know the truth. And truth ultimately ended up personifying. Well, on the other hand, we see that what evolutionists do is they also turn evolution into a worldview. That does become their worldview. Because then, by definition, everything that exists, including humans who they view as apes or related to apes, well, they just evolved. I mean, we're the result of a long series of happy accidents, ultimately. We weren't designed, we weren't planned, we're not the end result of a goal. We just happen to exist, our brains happen to exist, our thoughts happen to exist, and logic happens to exist. And so that's why I had asked the evolutionist, do you troll the World Wide Web demanding adherence to other theories? Because my experience has been, no one else in any other field has, I demand that you believe in this theory because it's true, you know, or whatever, however they want to put it. It's like, well, because it's a worldview to them. And that's why if you challenge an evolutionist on any point of biology, they tend to lose their minds. Let's just put it that way. Because to them, you're not actually just talking about biology. You're touching the core of their worldview and you're threatening that. That's been my experience many times. So that's why I would ask, do you troll the World Wide Web demanding adherence to other theories or just evolution? You know, just evolution. And note that, that's my point, is that that's one thing they want from us. They're demanding adherence to it. They want us to accept it. Okay. And now, what follows from that, turning evolution from a theory that is supposed to be about biology into a worldview, what comes with that is also that evolution and therefore atheism become neo-pagan. It's a pagan worldview. And so let me quote from Romans 1 as to why that is. Because it refers to the ungodliness and unrighteousness of men who by their unrighteousness suppress the truth. For what can be known about God is plain to them, because God has shown it to them. For the invisible attributes, namely his eternal power and divine nature, have been clearly perceived ever since the creation of the world, in the things that have been made, so they are without excuse. Okay? For, although they knew God, they did not honor him as God or give thanks to him, but they became futile in their thinking, and their foolish hearts were darkened. Claiming to be wise, they became fools, and, here it is, exchanged the glory of the immortal God for images resembling mortal men and birds and animals and creeping things. They exchanged the truth about God for a lie and worshipped and served the creature rather than the Creator, who is blessed forever. Amen. Right? So if nature gave birth to us, then we should worship nature, right? If we come from other animals, that's why you have these fantastical exhibits at museums where it's almost like a cathedral, right? And you're coming to visit the relics, as it were. So that's why I'm saying it's pagan, it's neo-pagan. Is because it is a form of nature worship by definition, if you're looking to nature as your creator. And so let's get back to my buddy Tom Jump and the discussion that we had about logic. So what he had said is logic is a description of reality. Logic is a result of evolution, which caused us to have these things. Now I have my worldview. Now I have logic, which I can always justify things. Okay, Now, when he says that, here's what I'm hearing, okay? This is what I'm hearing. Logic is a description of accidentally existing reality. Logic is a result of accidental, blind, random, chance, etc., evolution, which accidentally caused us to have these things. So now I have my worldview as per accidental cognitive abilities, not necessarily meant to ascertain empirical truth. I now have accidental logic, which I subjectively can, not ought, nor should, nor must, always justify things, even though there's no universal imperative to justify anything on atheistic evolution. Let me take a break there, because that was kind of heavy. So, if your view of the universe, and therefore all it contains, right, is that it just happened. It's accidental. Okay? By accident, I just mean exactly that. It just happened. It wasn't planned, it wasn't designed, it wasn't created, it wasn't meant to be, it's not the end result of a goal, of a plan. It just happened, it's accidental. Okay? Now, if the universe is accidental, then truth is accidental. Because whatever is true within that universe is accidental by definition. Right? So then reality is accidental. And I like to say that truth, or that facts are nuggets of truth based on reality. When you talk about truth, you talk about reality, you talk about facts, it's all really the same thing. It's a description of what's just out there in the universe. And if it's an accidental, then truth is accidental, reality is accidental, facts are accidental. You're just talking about the brute fact of what is out there. And if what is out there is accidental, all that follows, right? Like the line of dominoes. So that's why I'm saying logic is a description of accidentally existing reality. Right? So then logic is accidental on that view. It has to be. Right? Because ontologically, logic is just whatever's going on in the universe. And by definition, it's accidental. So then when we humans accidentally develop to the point where we have brains sufficient so that we can actually start talking about epistemology, we can start discerning that reality, that logic, then we're just describing accidents. Okay, A is not non-A. That's a good law of logic, but it's just accidental. I'm going to say that 1,000,000 times. And really, on this view, we're applying random, accidental, biochemical neural reactions going on within our haphazardly evolved brains to have what we call thoughts that are the result of predetermined reactions based on the accidental laws of physics, by the way, to then conclude things about logic and the universe. I mean, the whole thing is just based on one accident after the other. But fine, let's go with it. Okay, so it's all accidents. But we're here, we're humans, we have brains, we can think, and we can observe reality. It doesn't matter that it's all accidental, we can do that. Okay. So let's go back to Tom, because he also said, it's describing logic. It's describing reality, so reality exists. Logic describes reality. Our brains exist. They are in reality. And they describe reality with logic. So now we have logic. Now we have fallacies. We can now use those as justification. Okay, so now here's what I hear him saying. It's describing accidental reality, so reality exists accidentally. Accidental logic describes accidental reality. Our accidental brains accidentally exist. They are in reality accidentally, and they accidentally describe accidental reality with accidental logic. So now we accidentally have logic. We now have fallacies as brute facts, sure, but without a universal imperative to condemn them. I'll get back to that in a sec. we subjectively can now use those as justification. Yet again, there's no universal imperative for providing justification on such a worldview. Okay. So, when he's saying we now have fallacies,